Presenting Julie Fernandez, a world-renowned HR thought leader with deep domain expertise in multi-process HR, global payroll, and HR technology. Honored as the HR superstar by HRO Today for 5 years, Julie specializes in providing strategic assessments, provider selection, and RFP through to contracting and governance. Please welcome Julie Fernandez to present on the topic, Accelerating Payroll Transformation in the Aftermath of the Pandemic.
Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to today's post-pandemic payroll topic. I'm Julie Fernandez and I'm with ISG. We're a global leading technology and research advisory firm. I hope you're enjoying the Neeyamo Rise Above 2000 sessions. And I really look forward to sharing some insights with you over the next 20 minutes or so. So let's get started. All right, so by now, most companies have found their way to some sort of a new operating norm, with employees working from home where possible and returning to work where essential. This shift is coming at a record speed, and it's the type of acceleration that only a pandemic of epic global proportions might have caused. So here we are. It's truly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to imagine your future, taking full advantage of the breakdown in so many things that previously inhibited our innovation, from technology that nudges us to a full force come and get it shift in the workplace that makes everything digital and everything remote. And so all of us, we're really adopting hand over foot, partly because we must. And we find direct access, direct deposit, electronic pay, online forms. We're searching for everything we can get logged into. I mean, just our whole world has changed in that respect. So the next great challenge lies in finding ways to ensure that your employees are paid come what may. And that's kind of saying a lot, right? So given that we just started, the decade, or, we have like nine plus years of 10 years left to go. We have these continued spikes of the virus, and that is meaning that work from home, which was kind of a quick fix, is really extending to a pretty undefined period of time. We're rehashing labor strategies from furloughs to terminations as things continue on. Returns to work are taking on all sorts of different forms, from rehire to temps and contractors, as companies trying to figure out exactly how their business supply and demand will return. And government programs and legislation that were newly passed, continue to come as things extend and prolong. Just think of all the things unknown even now with year-end payroll, really just a month away. So, the certainties and the uncertainties from now until the calendar year is closed in 2020 are keeping us all busy still thinking about that. And then we have payroll leaders who are focused on being better prepared in the future. So even while we continue to adapt to change, working through your contingency plans, and that includes both internal and outsourced operations. Most folks use outsourcing in some way, shape, or form, whether it's just a system or some niche services. So these future preparations come in the form of contingency plans that include determining what the short and medium term changes to payroll are, in line with the business culture, in line with forecasts for the business, and also stated public opinions, right? So all of these things are happening, and it's all pretty daunting, really. So let's start with some of today's priorities in payroll. And, really I can't think of a higher priority in payroll than adhering to legal and regulatory changes. That stands out. It's top of mind in our first order of business, right? So payroll operations must maintain business as usual, and we also need to continue to comply with government paycheck protection programs, leave and labor laws, and more. New programs and measures and calculations and compliance measures continue to spur the demand for new systems configurations, calculations, and tax tables. And if you think about it, really, most global companies operate between 10 and 60 countries and are relying to some extent on their payroll provider for updates. And then local resources that need to be connected also offer, the greatest intel into the actions that are necessary. And the more that we see this happening, the more you will hear in other sessions us talking about a global payroll owner or a global process owner for global payroll. So listen in, we have a specific session designed on that we'll tell you about later. As far as top priorities in payroll go, again, some organizations must now consider how unemployment and other federal programs play into the decision to terminate employees or to rehire employees. And payroll has always been responsible for responding to labor laws that dictate when and how to separate employees. And so we see more and more direct relationship between the payroll operations and the workforce planning strategies that the organization is trying to navigate. The whole world is still pretty busy enacting programs involving eligibility for business loans and incentives, and many of those then create an incentive to keep employees or to behave differently with an alternative, some alternative to unemployment. And so keeping those on the radar and really aligning your payroll and workforce planning strategies has become a top priority today in HR. So let's look at a couple of other tactical priorities that have emerged front and center in 2020 for payroll. First up here, we find that many organizations have confirmed their suspicions that their processing costs are too high, or that decentralized payroll is too redundant, or you've recognized that there are too many points of failure between the provider and the retained staff, or different parts of your organization that are responsible for different pieces of the payroll processing activity. As companies are looking in every corner for rapid cost takeout that can offset all of their lost revenues, there are things that you can be doing here, which might include conducting a system-wide assessment to quantify the savings opportunities. That can be done really in just weeks, along with a roadmap to renegotiate any above market provider fees or consolidate providers. So, there are some options really to take a look at any places where you might suspect that you have those types of redundancies and it's driving your market cost to be too high. And the second item here to bring out is that one or more of your local country solutions may have failed during this period of time. So whether it is security or sustainability, whether scale was the problem or funding, companies like yours are starting to look tactically where they must for a payroll outsourced alternative where they may have had single country failures or, or specific niche items. So if you're a leader in that position right now, I say, yes, solve the immediate problem, but not without looking at the strategic fit, at least within the region, if not globally, for any of these specific incidences of single country failure. We like to be able to increase the payroll operations resiliency overall of our global payroll organization as one of the stated measures of success, even if we're dealing more tactically with a single country failure. And then we want to look at the shifting buyer lens. And this is interesting because the buyer, oh, I'm sorry, I think I've missed a slide in here. There we go. The last of the items of priority is the payroll governance and business continuity. And I skimmed over this a little bit quickly here because we actually have a panel session dedicated to this conversation tomorrow. You'll see the date and time here. And so rather than take up time today, I wanted to invite you to attend that speaker panel where I'll be joined by my friends Mary Blum from Payslip and Kelly Hussain from Hackett. And we'll spend a whole panel session talking about governance and payroll continuity. All right, so those were some of the top priorities. Let's turn to the shifting buyer lens. And remember, the payroll services, the buyer is actually you. And still, global payroll is one of the most complex stakeholder roadmaps in the whole organization. So as you well know, it involves all of the different functional areas of the organization, which I've listed here, and many times crosses all of the different geographies within the organization. So quite a broad stakeholder map to be in tune with and working with. And when we're thinking about the shifting buyer lens, the first thing that we think about is naming someone that's responsible for payroll across your ecosystem. So the global payroll process owner is really a good start there. Now more than ever, you need a person whose superpower is actually navigating internal and external channels and being able to do that, even if you don't own the budgets or the staff or the decisions that are necessary in order to impact the end-to-end payroll experience. So here you'll see some of the key items that we see the global payroll owners really being the champion for. And besides setting the overall design, direction, and governance, being an influencer, which is very much in line with, a lot of the conversations around an agile HR or an agile organization, having the types of influence to navigate across the stakeholders geographically and within the functions is super important. We'll go to the next area as we think about how you look at your payroll operations and your lens, and that is the business case and funding aspect. And so here, what you'll see is that a lot of the business case or the activities to come up with a business case that may have failed in the past are often because companies have taken a very stringent look at the payroll operations budget and expected maybe savings entirely from the payroll operations budget. And there really are only 3 hard dollar costs in a payroll budget, and those include the people and the software and the providers. So what does that mean to you? It means that in today's day and age, there's a little less convincing to do when it comes to senior management and investments that are needed for your payroll organization, because they've just recently seen and felt the pains of failure in this area. And it makes it much easier to understand that those go above and beyond the reduction of hard dollar costs. So practitioners often ask me, what are the sorts of softer costs or outside of the operations budget? What are the things that that we can use to make a business case? And so those are the things that you'll see listed here in bullets to the left. Those are some top level categories. And what I would encourage you to do now, as we're coming through a good solid 9 months of a new COVID world, is to track and quantify some of these occurrences and associate some values with those now. This is part of how we make our future actions actionable and bring some quantification to bear so that we can make some of the changes that we need to make in the future. If your leadership didn't happen to experience any painful payroll failures, they've certainly heard of folks that had. And so we also know, and usually leadership is quite aware of the fact that folks have gone to some pretty great lengths in order to deliver payroll. And so whether it's overtime or, whether it's some, crisis stand up of operations in order to make sure that folks get paid, those things are all fresh on the minds of your leadership. Um, and if you found your groove, just know that you'll be doing more of the same here for year end, right? So here we come into year end, and there's lots of new programs and new things that we have to adjust to, and so it's probably not over. And besides not being over, the pandemic at this point in time is showing signs of continuing into 2021, and that just means the continued dizzying array of public policies and government actions. So what comes to my mind here is just, buckle up, because we're not done yet. All right. I also wanted to take just a few moments here today to talk a little bit about operational agility and new norms. And I'm hoping that you're hearing, these as a top priority call to action for payroll leaders today. First of all, we know that you need to secure and strengthen your ability to be payroll agile. And agility is not, payroll is not one of the first areas that folks like to associate with being agile and nimble. But it is something that we must do because it's important now more than ever for us to look at processes from end to end, to look at the overall delivery model, which stems from processes to technology to roles, including the providers and the ownership within the organization, the skills, right? Looking end to end in order to figure out how can we make being nimble more repeatable. So getting to that point, because there's more change to come, is not only something that will help us keep our sanity, but something that will allow us to shore up and be more nimble going forward. Second of all, consider some new norms. And it's been a long time, like a really long time, since we've probably thought much about new and payroll in the same sentence. We like to get payroll, smooth and running, appropriate, and hope that it is pleasurable and not noisy and sorrowful, right? But the floodgates are pretty wide open right now to new. And so I've listed a few things here for you to consider when you're thinking about being open to new norms in payroll. And they go from maybe, the things that you've already been considering and experiencing down to the things that are, still emerging. So automation, is something that has bled over, especially if your organization uses robotics process automation. Definitely helpful to have that in-house already so that you can just tap into available capacity. And payroll does have some structure and some rigor to it that makes automation really great in order to try to bring some more power to some of those repeatable activities. We also see workflow automation in play here in order to improve the experience. And what we're looking at here is, everything from the local forms and inputs that are, kind of outside of the transactional process to making sure that we're connecting, the dots of the actual calculation and processing of payroll to all the sorts of inputs and data management that has to happen up front. We have dashboards and predictive measures and different tools. And not only are those evolving within the payroll processing core activities, but we're seeing quite a bit of niche players come up that will help bring some new insights and analytics and a new focus to that. So keep an eye out for those players as well, and happy to talk to folks about some of those different things. In the next category, I've brought forth the pay method and frequency. So, this has been kind of years-long battle in some cases for folks to change things around payroll that do impact materially how we deliver it, whether it's moving it out finally of paper checks, which is a very, only a few areas in the US notoriously seem to struggle with this, into things like earned wage access and daily pay. I know I've heard it at least in 2 Neeyamo sessions here at the opener. These are things that companies are looking for in order to bring benefits to their employees. I think Walmart, for instance, actually cites these sort of tools as the number 3 benefit to their employees, and Walmart's bigger than all but maybe 25 countries around the globe. So a lot of activities happening in the earned wage access area and freelance labor clouds where folks are not ready to rehire yet, then begin to raise some questions about how those folks might be best paid, whether it's accounts payable or bringing them somehow into the confines of the payroll group. These things aren't just gimmicks. Some of these things have become a feature for attracting talent, for reducing turnover, or how you can capitalize on these things to accomplish your payroll objectives, which might involve things like reducing pay groups or consolidating frequencies that seemed impossible in the past, right? So these can be some pretty big ticket items and actually make payroll a very strategic player with some strategic ideas at the forefront. Let me just close here, and then I think we might have hopefully a little bit of time for some Q&A, but let's close with some words about what's going on with the payroll providers themselves. And we know, for example, that Neeyamo is actively rolling out its strategies. Many of you might be very familiar with them, bringing new countries and things online with their technologies. All of the competitors out there are really just as actively advancing some of their own strategies and positions. And there's, also been a number of new evolutions in this area. So multi-country providers, those that focus on looking at solutions across multiple countries and bringing those types of advantages, in the past had not considered single country, providing to single countries. Some of them will, and that's new. So you might want to take a look at that if you are kind of tactically looking to fill your single country failures and want to be a more strategic thinker. There are situations where, where the multi-country providers like a Neeyamo might actually consider looking at a single country scope with a more strategic roadmap. We also see that new account selling, so looking at expanding for the providers, is very different than kind of net new selling. And it means having deeper resources and being able to go deeper into conversations. So you might just want to be aware of that as you're thinking about how to plug providers into your overall payroll strategy for the world. The provider landscape here has changed a lot. I mean, a lot, just in the years leading up to COVID and now through this year. So you really need to think about the fact that some of them are building out and have a strategy of improving their technologies. Some of them are merging and buying local country providers. They're all filling gaps in some strategic way. There might be partnerships. We've forever heard of partnerships in this market, but it's a little bit like dating. So it ranges from, being exclusive to being more of a one-night stand. And a key tip for you as you look to accelerate your roadmap in global payroll and look at your payroll strategies is to think about, and understand really the impact and the direction of some of these providers, and make sure that your information is current and recent. And also to understand the alliances that are there. and who is aligned with who and how that might drive their motivations. And so this is something that I spend a lot of time with, and am very happy to answer some questions or to help folks who are looking to understand kind of the overall roadmap of providers in the space, and how they've been moving and how they interact with each other and with the client systems. Sorry, let me see here. There we go. One last tip from a provider perspective is, there are benchmarks, there are payslip costs that are out there. Those are great information points, especially when you're looking at your overall payroll ecosystem, but these are not lookup tables, right? And so there's a tendency really for people to think that, it's just a scale issue. And if you have a number of employees, that ought to, drive you to some sort of a reference point on what cost you should be paying per payslip, and then, driving that cost to be as low as possible. And really, this is an area where complexity matters, and scope, delivery scope matters. And so in a day and age where there's more complexity and compliance than ever, the devil really is in the details, and so is the cost. And so I would encourage you to just know that there's a lot more underlying some of these sorts of data points, and you might want to seek a little bit of assistance in working with those. I think I tried very hard and to watch everything I'm supposed to watch and make sure that I got to the end here with a little bit of time for any Q&A. So let me pause here and invite anyone who might want to put a question into your chat box or your window or whatever you have here that would give you the ability to add a question to do so. I'm also, very available. I put the name of the LinkedIn group where we've begun to assemble some practitioners. It's an all HR payroll leaders group called Digital HR Connections, trying to form a community for relationships between different virtual conferences for conversation with peers, which is something that people most want to do, is to be connected to peers. Very happy to do that, and invite you to join that group if you don't have your questions in order today to share. I think I'm just hitting the end here, and I do want to make sure that I invite folks and let you know that I will step into the speaker lounge. That's what we're calling it, the speaker lounge, to be available if anyone would wish to join there or have some more private questions or conversation that they would like to have about their own global payroll operations, single payroll, regional payroll, and managing through the pandemic and the things to come.